What's up, kids? David here with Solid X State, and in this video we're going to be talking about the Alien franchise, Ridley Scott's Alien films, in particular the prequels, and even more in particular Prometheus. So what I'd like to talk about here is, I don't want to go into length about the whole movie, but I would like to point out, I would like to get to sort of the crux, of the issue, the sort of the elephant in the room, maybe even the thing that gets overlooked, because it's so evident, and we just want to run forward and explore the nuance of the film, and what are the themes, in the character arcs and whatnot. But yet there is something foundational to the whole premise that I would like to talk about. And it is also something that can be seen in science fiction in general. Oftentimes science fiction will broach subjects that the science of the day, is insecure or unwilling or too set in their ways to discuss. I wonder, is it not often that art can, by means of human intuition, is it not the case that art can imagine things about reality that analytic thinking falls short of? Is it not the case that the creativity, the creative process of art, and the intuition of the artist can sometimes, reach forward and grab hold of the future and sort of make a statement that later, in the course of time, we realize, dude, this was the real deal, man. This guy, art sometimes points to reality. It does, sometimes. Intuition is a process that gives us the ability to know something directly without analytic reasoning. So that's what I'm talking about when I say intuition. It's the idea that sometimes that things can appear to be, and one can sort of have a sense of the truth of a thing without necessarily having all of the data to rest upon. I'm not trying to suppose that intuition is preferred, but I'm saying that intuition, can have its benefit, man. Let us not disregard, things when they show themselves to be something of merit. In intuition, and the intuition of the artist, and the artist's ability sometimes to imagine the larger truth of a thing, wherein the scientist slowly ascends the mountain of facts. Sometimes the intuition of the artist can lay his crosshairs upon the reality of the summit, right? So what is going on in Prometheus? What is going on is that there are these beings that the film begins with. The film is the introduction of the film is to present to us these beings that we later understand to be the engineers. And the idea is that these engineers are, galactic farmers. They seed planets with life. Now, this premise isn't invented by Ridley Scott. Many science fiction novels have, as I suggested, broached the idea before. And the reason the reason that this comes up, not that it's a novelty. The reason that it comes up is because science fiction authors, some of them, acknowledge the controversy in the sciences where in the question of life isn't soundly argued, that the question of the origins of life is yet up for debate. But oftentimes it is the artist who is willing to acknowledge this evident truth. Oftentimes, unfortunately, the sciences are so couched in, they are so captured in the politics of their culture that they can't have an honest conversation. And so what we find, man, sometimes it's the artists, man, sometimes it's the creators that are willing to have an honest conversation. And I think that this film, it points to that. It is a suggestion that, you know what? Life requires an engineer. Life, the complexity, the enormous, profound, ultimate complexity of a single living cell requires the craft of intent, requires the thought of purpose, requires the hand of an artist, if you will. It requires the knowledge of an engineer. And the film, the whole film lays in this mortar bed of idea. This idea that life began with engineers. It's really cool that the writers of the film even use the word engineer, because it's specific. It invokes a certain imagery. That the film doesn't call them creators, the film doesn't call them gods, the film calls them engineers, because it implies the necessary skill set that for life to arise. This is a subject matter that oftentimes is, as I said, only broached by science fiction. Or, of course, Christianity. Or theists, or whatever you want to say. But yeah, man, so the real deal is this. Proverbs chapter 8. If you read nothing out of the Bible, please read Proverbs chapter 8. Man, it is a phoenix rising from the flames, dude. It is all day long awesome. Proverbs chapter 8. It says here at the beginning, does not wisdom call? Does not understanding raise her voice? At the highest point along the way, where the paths meet, she takes her stand. Here in this passage, we find that understanding and wisdom stand above the paths of life. At the highest point along the way, wisdom stands. At the highest point along the way, wisdom stands. The statement is to say that wisdom is essential. That understanding is not a construct of men. That understanding is a prequel to mankind. That wisdom and understanding are prequels to mankind and are foundational to our lives. That wisdom stands above. Wisdom occupies wisdom and understanding occupy a seat above men's reality. Beside the gate leading into the city, at the entrance she cries aloud, "To you, O people, I call out. I raise my voice to all mankind. You who are simple, gain prudence. You who are foolish, set your heart on it. Listen, for I have trustworthy things to say." Further down in verse 22, Proverbs 8, verse 22. The suggestion here is that which is most preeminent. That which, rises above the fray and is absolute, is foundational. The sciences today are always wanting to break down reality. They are wanting to reduce reality and to try to find, its root. They want, at the Hydlon, the collider in Europe where they smash particles together, they're trying to find, the ultimate, the ultimate system, the ultimate mechanism that is somehow at the core, somehow at the root of all things. That the point being that somehow they can explain the emergence of all things by finding this root, this rudimentary system, almost like an algorithm that somehow if you just let this algorithm run its course, it will explain the emergence of all things. And this is sort of the obsession, of the scientific naturalism. And yet what we find here in the scripture and what some science fiction films and authors are willing to broach the subject and to suggest that maybe at the core of reality, maybe at the bottom, maybe at the foundation of the world is wisdom and knowledge, is the hand of an engineer, is the purpose of craft, is the blueprints of the architect. Down in verse 22, the Lord brought me forth as the first of his works. What did the Lord bring forth as the first of his works? Well, at the beginning of this chapter, it's talking about wisdom. Does not wisdom call out? Does not understanding raise her voice? At the heights upon the way, at the highest point along the way. So the subject here, the subject is wisdom and understanding. Wisdom and understanding. And then down in verse 22, the Lord brought me forth as the first of his works. So what was the first works of God? The first works of God, before the Big Bang, right? What was before? What predated? What was the prequel to the Big Bang? Wisdom and understanding. Before his deeds of old, before his works of old, I was formed long ago, ages ago, at the very beginning, when the world came to be, when there was no watery depths, I was given birth. When there were no springs overflowing with water, before the mountains were settled in place, before the hills I was given birth. Before he made the world or its fields, or any of the dust of the earth, I was there when he set the heavens in place, when he marked out the horizon on the face of the deep. Dude, tell me that's not killer. Dude, how can you not see, how does that not resonate as completely awesome? Before the mountains were settled in place, before the hills I was given birth, before he made the world or its fields or any of the dust of the earth, I was there when he set the heavens in place, when he marked out the horizon on the face of the deep. When he marked out the horizon on the face of the deep. Other translations will say, when he drew a circle upon the face of the deep, describing the formation of the world. That's just too much. When he established the clouds above and fixed securely the fountains of the deep, when he gave the sea its boundary, so that the waters would not overstep his command, and when he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was constantly at his side. I was filled with delight day after day, rejoicing always in his presence, rejoicing in the whole world, and delighting in mankind. Who is delighting in mankind? Who is delighting at the inhabitable world? Who is daily rejoicing in his presence? Wisdom and understanding. Wisdom and understanding. The implication being that our lives are not, baseless, opaque, emerging without meaning and returning to the meaninglessness of the void. This is not reality. Rather, reality is the craft of an ultimate engineer. We see scientifically, we see in reality, in the things we observe, in the things that we measure, in the things that when we look into the fabric and nature of things, what we find is the demarcation of purpose and of the underlying fabric of engineering. The underlying fabric of engineering. And this is how the Prometheus film begins. It begins with engineers, and then as the film jumps forward into modern time, the protagonists of the film, they come to the realization that their DNA matches their DNA, that they find that there is a pattern in reality, and they recognize that they were created, that they have a creator. The film, I'm not trying to suggest that the film is a Christian film. I'm not trying to suggest that the film believes in God. The film it's a science fiction film, but it broaches a subject. The film broaches a subject that many teachers, many professors, in some instances, astronomers and physicists, it broaches a subject that many today are not willing to talk about, because somehow it's off subject, man. Somehow it's off limits. And yet the artist, in his intuition, is able to lay his crosshairs upon the summit of what is, and present to us a narrative and an idea that is reflective of reality. Yo, God bless, man. Proverbs chapter 8. Give it a read. It's totally, man, worth it. And, I think it's interesting because, so often, man, people think, the Bible is just a bunch of rules, telling you what to do with your life, It's like, man, give me a break, dude. I mean, the scripture is totally rock and roll, and you're missing out. Every day that you don't give the Bible a minute of your time, 5 minutes of your day, every day that goes by, man, it's your loss. It's your loss. You're missing out. Yo, God bless. Take care. See you guys next time. Like and subscribe.